for coming today. The Center for Integrative Environmental Health Sciences and Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology welcomes everyone to our Environmental Health Science Series seminar. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Luz Huntington-Moskos. She's an associate professor and director of the Community Engagement Core for the Center for Integrative Environmental Health Sciences here at the University of Louisville. She received her PhD in nursing from the University of Alabama, Birmingham in 2013 and completed postdoctoral work at the University of Kentucky Breathe program in 2014. Dr. Huntington-Moskos is a 2021 to 2024 fellow in the Betty Irene Moore Fellowship for Nurse Leaders and Innovators. Her program of research is focused on the development of report-back strategies geared towards adolescents with the goal of building environmental health literacy and promoting positive health behavior changes. She has a long-standing interest in promoting adolescent health, which she first developed during her work as a high school science teacher in the Peace Corps, and this was in Malawi between 1994 and 1996. Her research is published in peer-reviewed journals such as Preventing Chronic Disease, Journal of Adolescent Health, and Public Health Nursing. With that, Dr. Huntington-Moskos, you can take it away.
Thank you, Tyler. With a name like Luz, you can see why I never really like introductions. So Luz, if you haven't met me before, my first name is Luz. It is from my grandmother, who is Bolivian, and it is the noun for light if you're a Spanish speaker. So there you go. I maybe sometimes am too much of a team player. So when Dr. Barnes said, hey, we need someone to present for our RIG for climate change and environmental justice, I thought, well, you know, I probably need to help kick this off so that we have content that's very relevant to the RIG. Foolishly on January 4th of the new year, you know, my brain was a little slow to catch up on that. But as Tyler so clearly helped me with the introduction, my work is usually focused on air quality, home monitoring, and report back strategies to help people understand science communication and have information to impact their own health behaviors. Disaster preparedness is not really my home base, but having background in public health nursing, I'm not afraid to kind of stick my toe in it. So I'm going to share this with you. Please know these are very preliminary findings, and it's kind of, in my opinion, research light, because our seminars are very focused on bench science and biochemical cascades, and this is some very clear, short survey research to help engage people in the discourse. So the goals are a little bit different. This is not mechanistic. This is more, join me in this conversation. Let's start talking about this. Okay, so. All right, so my objectives. I'm going to lift the veil a little bit. Being the core leader for the Community Engagement Core, I have to try to keep my finger on the pulse of what NIH is hoping for, and why are we even discussing this, and why is it part of our center. So I'll share with you some of the knowledge that I've tried to keep on top of to be responsive. And I'll share with you the DR2 portal, which is an open access portal that has different resources for all of our centers and for researchers in NIEHS to engage in this work. And I have an ulterior motive. Because this is not my home base, I really would like to cultivate researchers that are willing to do some of this as a side hustle as well, right? So this is not my main bread and butter, but it's work that needs to be done if we as a center are to address community needs. But it's not a burden that I can shoulder alone, or that the Community Engagement Core can shoulder alone. You know, we need exposure scientists and different scientists looking at this. So building a team that's willing to reach out and do a little bit on the side would be a great add for our center. I'll share with you some of the work we've done reaching out to community members, and then I'll share with you the Kentucky Disaster Ready study that we launched in 2023 to try and get a discourse rolling. So it's always great to look back at our strategic plan. We're in the midst at NIEHS to developing a new one, but I just thought it would be interesting to look at the strategic plan that we've been working off of to see how often disaster is mentioned in the strategic plan. And so it is mentioned under co-exposures when it acknowledges the complexity of climate change and disasters and how they impact individuals. And it was also mentioned under promotion, translation, knowledge to action. Again, addressing the disaster complexity, the mixtures that occur, and how that impacts people's environmental health. I also, because we're all in the midst of this painfully, our RFA for our renewal, I thought to myself, let me look and see how that is described in our RFA to get our center renewal. And I guess surprisingly and not surprisingly, those renewals, those RFAs are meant to be general and allow for each center to craft its own mission and vision. But disaster preparedness, climate change, those are not mentioned by name as keywords when I search the documents, and anti-racism isn't either. And the reason I mention that is because those topics, they are, even though it's not written in the RFA, those are threads that we are asked to take hold of and to thread through our centers. So I think it's interesting that the RFA is very general, allowing us to create our own vision, but there is an undercurrent of disaster preparedness, climate change, environmental justice, anti-racism are all themes that all centers should hold. And the community engagement core is, you know, for better or for worse, the hub of that. Ideally, it would be threaded through all. It makes us look stronger as a center. Okay, so how can we do this as a team that might interest us? I know that for some people's research on their hub of research where they're centered, disaster preparedness may seem like a reach. But there are a lot of resources out there that we as a center and as a community engagement core are just getting used to and understanding. You know that abruptly in December 2021, we had the tornadoes that struck and cut through like a line through Western Kentucky. We happened to be in Henderson County when the tornadoes cut through. So we were there experiencing some of that weather as it was kind of swirling and getting ready to launch on us in that evening. We were working with community members that day. So it's very relevant to us, and our community partners in Mayfield, who you'll see in a short while, have felt it quite substantially. So these disaster research response portal is a great entree for a lot of us, and we in the community engagement core are trying to understand some of this. It is a portal that helps you not start from scratch. So there are surveys, pre and post surveys, exposure surveys. There are protocols that are already written from different institutions across the country. This, when this first happened, we are a fairly new center. We're trying to establish our work as community engagement core, and all of a sudden we have this significant disaster. And I admittedly was like, what do we do? Chris States and I had some very good conversations about mission drift. We have set out these specific aims on what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how does disaster preparedness thread into that? Am I supposed to switch gears? What am I supposed to do? So these protocols, these surveys kind of give you a place to land to start off as a launching point, so you're not completely starting from scratch. I share this with you so that if you feel like there are exposures and things that you may be interested in a disaster context, that you can look at some of these tools so that people can be ready to go. Some centers have rapid response teams. I'm not necessarily sure that we would want to have that as an investment, but maybe as an idea or a concept on paper that we could act on should it be needed. I encourage you to dream up where your role may fit. As a center, we have some work and expertise that we could offer. And the beauty of it is you can search by different variables that you're interested in. Are you interested in the mental health aspect, which Dr. Becky Antle and her team have been very helpful with us in terms of researching the psychological and stress impact of being part of exposures that maybe others in the community don't experience. That's very much the case with tornadoes. We've had tornadoes in Western Kentucky, but in Eastern Kentucky, we had floods, very different dynamics. When you have floods, more people are impacted and you may be a stronger community as you respond because so many experience that together. Whereas a tornado slices through a county and your neighbor may have a home that's intact while yours is totally demolished. So there are lots of different variables to how these disasters exist and how we can explore them and provide support and new knowledge to promote resilience. And you can also go in there and search by type of disaster as well. For us here in the Kentucky region, I feel particularly in the greater Louisville area that flooding is something that is very, very relevant to us. And it's relevant to our mission as it's stated. We're very interested in industrial exposures in agricultural and traditionally agricultural settings. That's the theme that we try to move through our center. Well, the Ohio River has industry all along it, and should floods impact us in a substantial way, that will certainly be industrial exposures in more agricultural rural areas. So if we were to be, I don't know if the word is smart. If we were to be prepared, we would be trying to set a stage for having some knowledge for that. That's a tough thing to say, though, because we're all strapped for time and energy and what have you as individuals. But I encourage you to just take a look at some of this. It's quite interesting. And if there's a role that you might be able to play, that you would be ready to spring into action and work as a team, I think it would benefit us. So, and then they have rapid protocol designers. So if you don't have a protocol in the DR2, you can help design one. They have resources on different areas. They have a DR2 meeting that meets regularly. They have experts that connect in University of Washington, our colleagues that are at the Gulf Coast. So they have different expertise that you can connect with and network with and write publications with. This has to be a national effort, not just a regional effort. So we have a role to play should you have any interest. Okay, I started to look for some local statistics as well, why we should be concerned about this as a state of Kentucky. And also, I think it's important to think of what we're doing in terms of cross-border work as well. We always very naturally refer to Kentucky as a state, but Kentuckiana is a region that we all quite live in. I cross multiple bridges in a week, so I cross into Kentucky and Indiana, and I use multiple bridges near Owensboro, near Hawesville, near Louisville, so many bridges. We have Kentucky, Indiana region that we really should be looking at. But here you have a few charts that were developed in the Courier Journal to kind of talk to us about how disasters are more common and more expensive. So really, if you can take a look at this, the dark blue, which you see more of past 2008, right here is 2008, and we're seeing a lot more blue. The blue is the severe storm count. The green is flooding count. So it certainly is what we see more of. There's the occasional freeze here, and then tropical the cyclone. So that's sometimes things that seem to come up to us from the south, but definitely severe storms and flooding. And then, of course, our colleagues that do the GIS and help us visually see what's happening. This shows the disaster declarations by county. I think this is quite interesting for us because I'm always quite aware that we have the CIEHS here. We are slated with Greater Louisville and Western Kentucky. That's very relevant for a lot of the industry that's in the rural part of Western Kentucky. And then we have our colleagues at UK CARES. I happen to be, like Tyler said in the introduction, I have a little more familial linkage with them since I postdoced over at our brother sister UK, but you'll notice that the disaster declarations in the southeast of our state are quite substantial. And then disaster resilience. Again, don't you just love these GIS maps? They really shout the story out at you, right? So more declarations of disasters in that southeast corner and less disaster resilience in that southeast corner. And really, that's a dire situation for them, but no less concerning for us. We should be better, and that region of our state just happens to be much worse. So that doesn't mean that we're off the hook. It just means that our neighbors have a steeper road to climb. Okay, so I appreciate visuals in terms of me understanding the scope of the issue. So the National Weather Service gave us some really nice diagrams and visuals of how the storm and the tornado in 2021 cut across the region. This impacted a number of counties that we've been talking to. So we've talked to Madisonville, Dawson Springs, we talked to Graves County for Mayfield and tried to connect with them a little more substantially. And we have two members, one just rotated off, but two members in Bowling Green that were talking to us about the disaster response in Bowling Green. When that first happened in our own learning curve, we were able to share with them some FEMA infographics and fact sheets about good safety gear for debris clearing and things like that. In my own learning curve, I learned that in the immediate aftermath of disaster, they don't want to hear from me. They want linemen and they want basic needs. They want good infrastructure with disaster shelters. So it's very hard to connect as a community engaged person. You have to have the rapport. And we have a very wide, large region to connect with, and I cannot predict where the next tornado is. So it's a very hit or miss by nature. Not an excuse, just painting the picture. And so all we can do is really try to have our tentacles out to the region as best as possible, meet people, talk to people, let them know we're here. Sarah does a great job and Kat do a great job with kind of getting our story out by social media to kind of shorten that distance, at least virtually for us. So we're really trying to cultivate and build that understanding that we are present and available. My colleagues across the country have the same problems because when the wildfires hit in the northwestern part of our country, you know, nobody wants to hear about, well, let's do air quality monitoring right now. You know, there's a timeline concern that is a real hard to navigate, and you know, more heads are better than one with that. Okay, and then here is the severity of each impact that shows you a little bit. So, you know, anywhere from an EF3 tornado in Marion and Bowling Green, Warren County, EF2 in Bowling Green. So it was scattered across the region. Okay, so I want to share with you, I'm going to kind of, will it let me escape, Sarah? Okay, there. And do I need to double check if they can see that?
They will be able to see it.
Okay. Oh, none of that. Oh, I can just pull up here, right, Sarah? Okay, got it. All right, so I want to make sure that I share with you that video was created by Sarah Jump and Kat Ayton. They went out to Mayfield and they met for a, it was Team Rubicon, correct?
Yes.
So the
ribbon cutting the rebuilt home. And so that was in Hopkins County, and then after that, we went out to Mayfield and met.
And so Kat was able to take a weather radio and a basic disaster kit for that new home as a contribution to the effort and part of our community engagement. And then they went over to talk to our 2 community partners. So that was Riley Beth Willett, who is the public health director in Graves County, and Emmy West, who is a bank officer in the community. So the community members that have come to us to discuss some coordination and some outreach with the community. They have a long-term recovery coordinator, and the footage that Sarah shot was just this December 2023 to commemorate. So a lot of that you saw was still buildings with windows out and a lot of leveled buildings. When we first made contact with them, we met with them in the spring of 2022, and you know, half the police department was gone. I have seen where the tornadoes cut through rural areas like Tennyson, Holland, and Indiana, but I hadn't seen it cut through a city center like that, a town center. So it's pretty a destructive sort of image, and that destruction it lingers. So you get a call, you reach out to all the community members that you can when something like this happens, and we were asked to hold on. Thank you for reaching out. We need linemen, we need resources from our disaster shelter networks. So I met with colleagues at UK CARES, and we were trying to figure out what to do. It's a little bit hard to sit and wait. So we were trying to figure out what kind of effort could we put out there to keep the communication and conversation going, but might serve to acknowledge what's happening. So we decided to put together this quick survey. It's the disaster, we called it the Kentucky Disaster Ready Survey. And what we did was we worked with a colleague, there's a colleague, a nurse scientist at Hunter College in New York. And they had already done the work to validate a survey tool through the Delphi method. And so we asked for permission to use it, and we used part A of the survey because I'm going to pass it out to you. It's quite lengthy. And if you work with populations, human beings, our tolerance for very lengthy, long surveys is nil. So we used part A, and we did some demographics so that we could see where people were, their age ranges, some different characteristics. And we were hoping for 2 things. Number 1, to continue the conversation. When this kind of a disaster strikes, you have to be very sensitive to not re-traumatize the community that's been affected. But you have a teachable moment with the surrounding communities. They have witnessed it on the news. They see what's happening. They see how the communities are mobilized, and it may prompt them to think, okay, I need to prepare. So having the survey, you know, we allowed the survey not only to gather information, but, you know, after you're done, it serves as a teaching tool as well. Do I really have these things? Have I really had these conversations? So our goal was to kind of prompt a teachable moment, and also to collect a little bit of data to do some tailored sort of outreach in the future. So is this a nested, complicated sampling plan? No, it is a convenience sample. It is something that we put on social media. It is simply prompting to get the conversation moving. So it is using research on surveys as a tool to keep the conversation going, particularly for communities that are in recovery. We as human beings are very interested in the immediacy and the acuteness of a disaster, but it is very easy for the news cycle to switch and have something else happen, particularly since the whole world is connected and there's always something happening somewhere. So we were hoping that this would help us kind of keep the discussion going. So you'll see we had 11 demographic items, 19 items from the Household Emergency Preparedness Survey, and we recruited primarily through different social media listservs and area libraries. So we had a full list of libraries across the state, east and west, since we're doing this in a collaborative effort with our sister CEC for the P30, and just kind of sharing the survey items. All right, and so this is the article from the nurse colleague that created the survey tool, the HEPI. And then we just have some preliminary findings. Data collection is ongoing. So we have a sample of over 200. And as you can guess, when you put out a passive sample and you're using these sorts of tools, we automatically have mostly female, mostly white, and mostly college educated. That's the classic trifecta. So again, preliminary results. Our goal now is to really be a little more targeted to get a more diverse sample. Again, because it's a tool to initiate conversation, we don't feel like we have to stop with what we're doing, and we can continue and move forward with a little bit more strategy. But we did still find some interesting findings already with this small 200 sample size. Over half of the participants stated that they were prepared and had discussed an emergency plan with family. So this is a highly educated, high SES sample at this point. So my bar for this, I don't think this is that great. There's just over half of us. If this is such a highly educated sample with college education, I would hope that it would be closer to 75 or 80%, and it's not. So there's more work to be done even in the higher SES groups. 1/3 of participants stated that they had supplies set aside in the event of a disaster. So 30%, 33%, 35%, it's not very good. We can aspire for better. 1/3 stated they had a plan on how family members will contact each other during an emergency if they are separated. Is that plan, I need more data. This is where qualitative data comes in, because is your plan based in reality? Has anybody, we were just talking about this when we're having our good office talk. Has anybody watched, what's it called, Kat? The World Left Behind? Leave the World Behind, that recent movie is about us all. Cyber and technological communications are down. If your cell phone doesn't work, what are you going to do? So we need some of these things that are based in reality, not in catastrophizing, but if that infrastructure in particular isn't available to us, what's your plan? So even a little bit of qualitative data would be really interesting to build on with this as well. And then lastly, less than 20% stated that they had a supply of water that would provide at least 3.8 liters, 1 gallon of water per day per person. This one is hard, right? So it requires storage. It requires, timers on your calendar to switch it out every few months. It requires some thought and some preparation and resources. Disaster preparedness requires resources. There are some great basic disaster kits available by size of family and things, but again, resources. And if you are in a lower SES level for your family, for your community, for your neighborhood, a lot of times you have more eminent concerns, more prominent concerns, and the what if of a disaster doesn't rank in the top 10. So, and this, again, this data should be a lot better. If people have the means, and if they're in a higher SES, and then as a nurse, I have to reflect back on the hard questions. Where are you on this list? Right? So I have been rightly corrected by our external advisory board that I, as a community engagement core director, I do outreach, but I need to do inreach as well. So maybe as we kick off 2024, I need to be talking with our membership about good disaster preparedness in terms of keeping you safe and your family safe. So it's just a good way. You know, this data, if it were more diverse, I would be so much happier because I'd like representation in our data, but I can work with this. We can work with this. So the discussion, there are substantial improvements that can be made across all sectors. And we saw this data. We have pretty decent, you know, it's not a very big sample, but we do have from different counties across on Western and Eastern Kentucky. So we'll try to build that up in the few months to come and diversify our sample a little bit and fill out the picture that's starting to develop with this small sample size for this community engaged survey. And really, you know, I welcome any discussion from our membership about how to continue to thread disaster preparedness and as its sister topic, climate change. I will let you know that this survey, here is the top of the flyer. And then here's the QR code. If you would like to be part of the discussion, if you live in Kentucky and you're over 18, you can take the survey. It is part A of the survey that's going around, and 4 questions about climate change. For ourselves, UK CARES, and we as the CIEHS, we had some discussions as we were building this survey. What does our state and the people that we serve, how do they see natural disasters linked with climate change? Do they feel they're linked with climate change? Is that something that they have as accepted science? So we wanted to ask, so we asked 4 questions about that as well. So those, we haven't delved into looking at that piece of it yet, but it will be interesting to see how that's shaping up as well, because it's an important link for us, and it's one that makes climate change very real for all of us. So I encourage you, if you're at all interested, to be part of the survey. And then acknowledgement, we had an undergraduate student working with us, and then my colleagues from UK CARES, and then our team here to try to get disaster preparedness kind of woven through our work here at the CIEHS. Yay! I am of the philosophy that talking a little bit less